party that's devoted to, while we're, strategizing and fighting to make a revolution, we're involved in the everyday struggles of our class, the working class, the people who, the labor, the proletariat. We're involved in their struggles in the everyday and to build a fighting movement. And, there's so much history that I, as a student, in all the history classes I took, I never learned that, things like Social Security, things like unemployment benefits were won by communists going out in the streets and fighting for it. And then just near here, there was the Ford Massacre, 1932, where, the unemployed councils, thousands of workers demanding unemployment compensation were gunned down by the ruthless automaker Henry Ford. And then, there's so much history we're not getting. The Workers' World Party is a party that's seeking to build a united party that fights against racism, sexism, and all the things that are tearing us down and tearing our class apart, and building a fighting movement for our class to eventually build a socialist society. Socialism being a world where the people, the working class, controls the economy. And we have the banks and the factories and all that are no longer held by an elite few who make the profits off everyone else's labor. But for once, the people are in control and are able to build a society that puts people and the environment and things that matter first and not the profits of the rich. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. And I'm glad you all came because you're interested in, it's a reality. Capitalism is killing us. BP, they're killing us. The police here in Detroit, they murdered a 7-year-old girl, Ayanna Jones, in her home. Poverty is killing people. Police brutality is killing people. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are killing people. They're closing schools. They're closing hospitals. They're taking away all the benefits that we've won through tooth and nails of struggle. And capitalism is a system that's killing us. And the answer is not to beg for more change from the capitalists. The answer is not to pick one group of capitalists and say, oh, you're the nicer capitalist. No, the answer is to take this system away and to put a system in place where the people have control. And the way to do that is to build a strong, fighting, working class organization that's devoted to knowing the theory on the one hand about how to win that, but also devoted to doing the work and doing the organizing on the other hand to bring it into being. So on that note, our first speaker is the editor of the Pan-African Newswire, Abayomi Azikiwe. And he's also an activist with the Moratorium NOW coalition here in Detroit, which has been fighting with all foreclosures and evictions. This is a group that's been, fighting one of the ugly facts of capitalism, which is that a house is not something you're guaranteed. There's people from socialist societies that come to visit the U.S. and they see homelessness and they see empty houses and they say, this makes no sense. They say, why is there empty houses here and homeless people here? It makes no sense. But it makes sense in capitalism, because in capitalism things don't get done unless it's a need to make a profit. And I also want to mention that Abayomi, in addition to his work with Moratorium NOW and Pan-African Newswire, is a contributing editor to Workers' World newspaper, a fine, weekly newspaper that puts out a revolutionary perspective on current events and will update you on the current struggles, which I hope everyone will pick up. So Abayomi is one of the best organizers I've had the privilege of ever working with, and I look forward to his remarks about the struggle currently. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Comrade Caleb for that very generous introduction. I want to welcome people who are from outside the city of Detroit here to the city of Detroit. I've been living here since 1967, when I was 10 years old. I came here around the time of the great 1967 rebellion from the southern part of the United States, in the state of Tennessee, where my parents had worked in the civil rights struggle there during the mid-1960s. So, coming from an area of the country that was very much consumed in the struggle for breaking down legalized segregation with Jim Crow, fighting for the right to universal suffrage, to end racist violence against African American people. Coming from that environment in 1967 to the city of Detroit, where we had the largest urban rebellion in the history of the United States up until that time period in 1967, and actually changed the course not only of the African American struggle in this country, but also changed the course of the people's movement here in the United States. It had a lot to do with shaping my consciousness in relationship to how racism, capitalism, national oppression, and the struggle for socialism are essential in anyone's world outlook during this particular epoch in history. Detroit today, we have often said, is the epicenter of the national as well as the, in a certain sense, the international economic crisis. I just want to briefly review some of the issues that actually make up the economic crisis here in the city of Detroit. Then I would like to talk about, very briefly, some of the historical developments here in the city of Detroit, to look at Detroit as a case in point in regard to what is wrong with capitalism and why the current downturn in the so-called capitalist economic business cycle is one that is going to be extended, it's going to be protracted, and it's going to usher in a new phase in the era of capitalism in this country and also throughout the world. Also, in the final phase of my talk, I want to talk about the necessity of building a fight-back movement against the current economic crisis, the current crisis in capitalism, and what are some of the aspects of that fight-back movement that we all are very much involved in trying to build, that must take place, and that will take place. Now, well, first of all, for those of you who are from outside the city of Detroit, if you drive around and you look at what is going on, even in downtown Detroit, but more so outside of downtown and within the various communities that surround the downtown area of Detroit, one thing that strikes you immediately is the crisis of employment. Detroit has the highest unemployment rate of any other major city in the United States of America. Officially, the unemployment rate in this city is around 27 to 28%. Yet unofficially, the unemployment rate has been estimated to be as high as 44.5% right here in the city of Detroit. Those are staggering figures. Figures that outstrip any other urban area throughout the United States of America. Now, in discussing the historical development of Detroit, we'll understand why the unemployment rate is at such an astronomical level in this particular area. Another aspect of the economic crisis here in the city of Detroit is the problem of home foreclosures. A major, major problem here in the city of Detroit. And unemployment bleeds into large-scale home foreclosures. If people don't have jobs, or if they're working part-time, or they're working jobs that don't pay a lot of money, that have no benefits and no real security, of course they're going to have difficult, very, very large problems in terms of maintaining a rented facility, let alone a home that they're trying to purchase or have purchased. The home foreclosure issue is very important when we talk about the city of Detroit, because as a result of the rising phenomenon of industrialization in Detroit during the turn of the 19th and 20th century and throughout the first half, well actually first 3/4 of the 20th century, people in Detroit had a very high rate of home ownership, probably the highest rate of home ownership of working class people, African American people, and people from nationally oppressed communities. People would be stunned when they would come to the city of Detroit in decades past in regard to the high level of home ownership here in the city. There were blocks and blocks and blocks, neighborhoods and neighborhoods after neighborhoods of people who come from working class backgrounds, who own their own homes. We don't see this in other cities, like Chicago, like New York City, and other parts of the United States of America. This is one aspect that made Detroit very, very significant. But a lot of that has been turned around, particularly over the last few years, but the trend has been going on for the last several decades.